Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. In this segment, I want to tell you 3 things that the media will not tell you about the current lawsuits regarding November 3rd. And the media refuses to even to talk about what's going on, right? The entire strategy from the media, 98% of their strategy is to ignore it. And 2% is, the 2% they do mention is merely there to ridicule the lawsuits and therefore ridicule you. But once you hear these very simple stories, like these very simply explained lawsuits, I hope you never watch cable news again, because what good are they? If cable news can't help us understand what's going on, what is the point of their existence? Why do we give them any of our time and attention anymore? Okay, first point, 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. So our Friday special a couple days ago was Bush v. Gore. The first and the main Supreme Court case of Bush v. Gore, there were 2, was based off the 14th Amendment. So here's the story. In Florida, at the time, on your ballot, you would punch out a little square to vote for the person, and then that's how they would push it through the tabulation machine based on if the square was punched out. But sometimes the piece of paper that you punched through, it wouldn't fall all the way out. So then what do we do with it? All right, we got a picture here, a little graphic of different potential hanging chads, different types of hanging chads, right? So the question was, how do we count those as votes? What do we do? Now, different counties had different standards, right? Some counties would say, oh, well, you know, the swinging door chad is fine, but a dimpled chad is no good or whatever. Different counties had different standards. And that was what the Supreme Court said violates the Equal Protection Clause. Because one county, a tri-chad might be counted. In another county, a tri-chad might be thrown away. And that would disenfranchise that person compared to this other person in Florida. And that's not equal protection. The Supreme Court said, having once granted the right to vote on equal terms, the state may not, by later arbitrary and disparate treatment, value one person's vote over that of another. Okay? That was the precedent set by Bush v. Gore. That's what Bush v. Gore was. That is the argument that Trump's team is using in Pennsylvania specifically, but a couple other states as well. Among other things in Pennsylvania, the state law says if an absentee ballot comes without all the necessary information on the envelope, proper signature, address, what they call a naked ballot. So in Pennsylvania, you have your ballot, you got to put it in a security envelope, and then you got to put that envelope in the big envelope. If it's not properly done, this law says, throw it away. Throw away the ballot. That's law. But Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, they said, whoa, no. Let's do this instead. Let's call the person and tell them that they can revote. So we get this ballot in the mail. The ballot's not in the security envelope like it's supposed to, or it doesn't have a proper signature. Let's call them up and say, hey, we got your ballot. You screwed this thing up. You can go ahead and vote again. That's called curing ballots. The problem is, this did not happen in every county in Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh and Philly it did, but in State College or whatever, anywhere else, it didn't. So there were different standards as when to accept a ballot and when to reject it. That is not equal protection under the law. When that case goes to the Supreme Court, Trump will definitely win it. There's no question he'll win it. By the way, that Supreme Court case in 2000, it was 7-2. So it wasn't even like a party line vote. 7-2 is obvious. So if this goes to the Supreme Court, Trump will win that specific case. The question is, then what? Right? Do we even know how many ballots were cured illegally this way? The law may have been clearly broken, but there may be no remedy for it. What a Supreme Court win for Trump would do in that case is it would give the state legislature enough of a cover to declare that the votes were corrupted and therefore vote for their own electors, right? But there's nothing really, it'd be a lot for the court to throw away the ballots themselves. It's happened before, as we've talked about a couple times. It's happened in Pennsylvania before. But that's a big ask. It's a big ask. We can talk more about what that legislative process looks like if that becomes more of a reality, okay? But anyway, that's one lawsuit that Trump's team will win when it goes to the Supreme Court. Quick timeout. Have you heard that anywhere? Have you heard anyone in the media talk about that? Have you heard Fox News talk about that? Have you heard anyone talk about that? That's like, again, like that's like super clear, super easy to understand. I haven't heard anyone mention it. Second lawsuit, Trump will win. This one's in Wisconsin. So in Wisconsin, you have to show an ID to vote. Novel concept, right? But there's one way that you can get an absentee ballot even without having to show an ID. There's one way to do it. You have to say that you are indefinitely confined. So what does that mean? Indefinitely confined because of physical illness or age or infirmity is the technical word that they use. So you're too old to ever go anywhere. Too old, you're morbidly obese, you're super sick, you just never leave the house. So the point of that isn't even that you can't go vote in person because they have absentee ballots for that. The point of this is I'm so old and I never leave the house, I don't even have an ID. That was the intent of the law, is how do we not disenfranchise people who don't have IDs because they're too old or sick? So it's, oh, okay, those people don't need to show IDs. If you're too old or sick, you don't need to prove an ID. Okay? Because the idea was there'll be a couple people who do that, right? The county clerk of Dane County, that's Madison, back in March on his Facebook page, this is before their spring primary, he said on his Facebook page that people who are concerned about COVID can apply for an absentee ballot and say they're indefinitely confined. Now, it's not just getting the absentee ballot. Again, it's getting the absentee ballot without even having to upload an ID. The local Republican Party sued. It went all the way to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin unanimously, I'll quote it here, unanimously, McDonald, that's the Dane County clerk, appeared to assert that all voters are automatically, indefinitely confined solely due to the emergency, COVID, and the safer at home order. And that voters could therefore declare themselves to be indefinitely confined when requesting an absentee ballot, which would allow them to skip the step of presenting or uploading a valid proof of identification. Indeed, we do not see how the respondents could prevail with an argument that such statements in the March 25th post constitute an accurate statement of the relevant statutory provisions, which means get out of here with your argument that that follows the law. It doesn't. So the Wisconsin Supreme Court rebuked the Democrats outright and said the clerk was encouraging people to break the law, ordered him to take down that Facebook post. But the damage was already done, okay? I'm gonna play some numbers for you here. Guys, don't put these up quite yet, all right? This is, I have here the number of people who have requested indefinitely confined ballots each year, okay? Now again, these are without an ID. You don't need to have an ID. Okay. So in 2015, 972 people requested an indefinitely confined ballot. Sounds about right. Sure, fine. But that was a low year. 2016, it popped right back up, but that was an election year, right? Just under 9,000 people. But okay, 9,000 people, fine. Then it was 2,500 people in 2017. 2018 popped up again, 14,000 people. 2019, there were about 5,000 people. So you see a trend here, right? Let's say that's about 7,000 people or so who request an indefinitely confined ballot every single year in Wisconsin. Okay, that's fine. So it's about, we'll call it 7,000 people. All right, guys, pop it up. How many people this year? See that bottom number there? 170,000. Usually it's 5 to 7. This year, 170,000. I want to be clear. Just because you're worried about COVID, let's say you're old or whatever, you're immunocompromised or whatever, and you're worried about going out with COVID, you still have an ID, right? You still, this isn't, oh, if you're worried about COVID, you should request an absentee ballot. Sure, fine. This is if you're worried about COVID, request this type of ballot. You don't even need to show an ID for it. What the heck is that? Now, Biden won Pennsylvania or Wisconsin by 20,000 votes. So let's say 50,000 people were legitimately indefinitely confined, which again, they weren't because you would still have an ID, right? But let's say there's 50,000 legitimate people. That leaves 100,000 votes that were obtained fraudulently. And you can face criminal charges if you requested an indefinitely confined ballot and you're not actually indefinitely confined. It's 100,000. All right? So Trump's going to win that case. But again, what can a court do? Better not do this again, Wisconsin. They're going to throw away all the absentee ballots? Are they going to throw away 170,000 of, I mean, what do they do? Again, it's happened before. The courts have thrown out votes before, but that's never to this extent. And again, this is when the state legislatures could step in and name the electors themselves. Okay, have you heard that anywhere? Have you heard that analysis anywhere? I'll give you one more. This is a professor of statistics at Williams College. He went to Yale, got his doctorate in mathematics from Princeton. Here's the story. Trump's team called up as many people as they could who requested an absentee ballot in Pennsylvania. So my friend was one of these people. If you're in the military, you can declare your residency anywhere because you're in the military and you're traveling all over the place. So my friend is from Pennsylvania. So he lives here in the military, right? He lives here, but he gets his ballot from Pennsylvania, right? So it was like the day after the election. Yeah, it was the next day. He got 20 phone calls in one day from Pennsylvania numbers. I don't know if he ever ended up picking up, but that's what this was. So Trump's team called up everyone that requested a ballot to vote absentee in Pennsylvania. In the end, they called 20,000. Right, so they ended up calling 20,000. 2,684 picked up and answered some of their questions. Very long story short, and we'll go into more detail once this affidavit, once this affidavit gets presented in court, we'll go over in more detail. But the professor concluded that surely, this is with a 99% confidence interval, surely between 37 and 58,000 ballots were requested by someone other than the registered Republican themselves. And the number of ballots requested by registered Republicans and returned, but not counted, is somewhere between 38 and 56,000. So even if you take the low end of both of those numbers, that's 75,000, and they're probably Trump voters, 75,000 votes that were illegally cast, or either not counted properly or whatever, right? Illegally, fraudulently obtained, or not counted, or 75,000. Right now, Biden's up by 81,000 in Pennsylvania. So again, I know I went through that one fast, and we could talk about the math of that another day. We can go through it in more detail, and we can debate the statistical analysis of it. And I'd love to have that debate, but that's my point. The media has just ignored this Williams math professor and the data and the affidavit completely. There's a few wacky conspiracy theories out there, and the media brings those up, right? They bring those up to ridicule. But the other 98% are very legitimate claims we're talking about. And by the way, claims that the left has been making about voter fraud for years, and now all of a sudden completely ignored. I got to take a break here. I want to talk more about this so-called news next. Get into more detail about them. They're just absolutely worthless. I'm so over them, and I hope you are too. You're here, so. Home title lock. Man, so it's always something, right? It's always something. There's always someone out there trying to scam you. Someone to make money without having to actually work. And there's just things we got to do to protect ourselves. And the good news is they're mostly easy things, right? So you put a password on your email, right? You lock your front door. You get home title lock for your home. Just simple things. So here's the deal. Some hacker breaks into your county registrar's office, and I don't think my county has the most advanced security software keeping my title safe. They forge your signature because they have all your documents right there, so they just trace your signature. They get a quit claim deed, and then they start taking out loans against your home until all your equity's gone. And because the county, they think it's you, so they don't tell you that someone's doing this, right? They think it's you doing it. So you don't know this is going on until the collections company starts calling, asking for their money. But by then, the fraud, they're long gone, right? And you're paying for these bills, and then you got to pay for your lawyers because you're going to court, and it's this whole huge, because you want to get your title back. So it's this huge hassle. And you had no idea what was happening. That's maybe the worst part of it all. So when you have home title lock, the scammer messed with the wrong guy, right? Someone does this to your title, and home title lock notifies you right away, and you put the kibosh on the whole thing. And then home title lock will spend up to $250,000 in legal fees to help you restore your home title to you. How awesome is that, right? So go to hometitlelock.com. You can register your address, see if you're already a victim. And then make sure you use the code RADIO for 30 days of free protection. Radio, promo code radio, HomeTitleLock.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I want to talk in this segment about cable news and how they're totally worthless. I've stopped watching it all completely, and it's improved my life. I encourage you to do the same. Doesn't it bother you a little bit that we have these massive money-making machines in New York City and DC, just billions of dollars, massive infrastructures? And what do you get out of it? What do you get out of it? What good are they? What service do they provide for we the people? We give them way too much of our time and attention, and it's mostly just out of habit. And I suggest we question that habit and rethink all of our inputs every single day that we take in, starting with what news sources we watch. Have you heard anyone on cable news or any newspaper lay out the legal arguments that we laid out in the last segment? And I'm not saying like we're like a bunch of heroes over here. I feel like this is basic work. Like, here's the case that Donald Trump's team is making about voter fraud. For years, the left, and the last 4 years specifically, they've done nothing but whine about voter fraud and how easy it is to hack into elections. 67% of Democrats think that Russia changed the vote tally for Trump in 2016. And then this year, all of a sudden, it's all magically, just all those concerns are gone. Amazing. Oh, there's not a lick of voter fraud evidence, we're told. We were told it's the most secure election ever. Where's the evidence for that? What could possibly make this election so much more secure than previous ones? Like, that didn't make any sense. Like, it's more secure. More secure. It's clearly not. We've had unprecedented amount of absentee ballots, which there was a commission just a few years ago led by Jimmy Carter, which said absentee ballots are the most vulnerable for fraud. And in Pennsylvania, normally there's 260,000 absentee ballots. This year there's 3 million, and we're supposed to believe that the election was more secure than ever? You kidding me? But the media won't cover any of the truth. Molly Hemingway, she wrote a great piece in The Federalist about a bunch of things, but in particular, she talked about Lawrence Tribe. Larry Tribe is this far left-wing nut law professor at Harvard. He teaches constitutional law at Harvard, but he's not just any professor. He's been given some honor at Harvard that only 68 other professors in all of its history have ever received. So he's not just a professor at Harvard, he's the professor at Harvard. He's the top most revered and esteemed professor at the top most esteemed and revered school. And you couldn't pay me the Harvard Law tuition of $67,000 a year to have my kids educated by this guy, right? July 25th, 2016, he wrote, "I'm not into conspiracy." And then went on with this whole thing about how Russian oligarchs compromised Trump with business deals. And that's why Trump won't release his tax returns, because he has an intimate business relationship with Putin. A couple weeks later, he was talking about Trump committing treason. I think we have a couple of these tweets here. Treason. The next day, he said Trump violated the Logan Act. Fast forward to October, he said Putin rigged the election. November, he talked about Russia meddling in our election. And gosh golly, wouldn't you know it, here's Larry Tribe saying that the electors should vote their conscience and go beyond the will of the people in 2016 and just vote for Hillary anyway. Larry Tribe saying that. He also said in November that Trump violated the emoluments clause. December 11th, he said Rex Tillerson, who was then Trump's Secretary of State, is Putin-linked, like he's some sort of Russian agent. The very next week, he said, quote, "Putin hacked our democracy." He called Trump a Russian spy. He said calling Trump a Russian spy is an understatement. All right, so he's more than a Russian spy. January 2016, he said we need a special counsel to investigate Trump for colluding with Russia. Are you with me so far? This was all done before Trump's inauguration. He wasn't even the president yet. All right? And he's violated the Emoluments Clause, the Logan Act. He's a Russian spy, an agent, a blah, 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 blah. He wasn't even the president yet. And I could do this for the rest of the hour, but you get the point. You get the point of who these people are. They're absolute, total hacks. By the way, Russia really stunk at hacking this election, huh? They did a great job, apparently, hacking the 2016, but they just couldn't pull it off in 2020, huh? Some Russian stooge, Trump must be still, right? Russia couldn't pull it off this go around. And then after, he was inaugurated, the Dems and the media for the next 4 years called him an illegitimate president. They ultimately got him impeached for what? Does anyone even remember why Trump was impeached? Do you remember why he was impeached? He was impeached for that phone call with I don't even remember, but it was the phone call that Trump released the transcript of the next day. Right? What do we? Anything to further delegitimize them. And now we're supposed to unify and trust them and listen to them. Listen, on this show, we haven't talked about a conspiracy theory once. We haven't given 1 second of airtime to anything other than actual numbers, like we did in the last segment, and making only the cases for electronic voter fraud that the left has been making for the last 4 years. Just off the top of my head, we've done a million of these, but Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar back in 2018 or maybe in 2019 wrote this whole thing about electronic voting machines, right? And how they're so ripe for fraud and easily hacked, okay? So I haven't made any argument that the left hasn't made for the last 4 years about electronic voter fraud. We have this celebrity video. I don't know. Let's just play it. I'm saying, do we really want to hear a celebrity? Let's just play a couple seconds of it. This is 2016, urging Republican electors to do the right thing and vote for Hillary instead.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you. As you know, our founding fathers built the Electoral College to safeguard the American people from the dangers of a demagogue and to ensure that the presidency only goes to someone who is to an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications.
An eminent degree. Someone who is highly qualified for the job.
The Electoral College was created specifically to prevent an unfit candidate from becoming president.
There are 538 members of the Electoral
College. Enough. I can't. I'm done.
36 other.
That's all we needed. That right? This is an outrageous violation of our norms. How will we ever recover? This was 4 years ago, right? But me saying today, hey, we have a really low rejection rate of ballots in Pennsylvania. Usually it's about 3% rejection rate for first-time voters, and now it's 0.03%. Like, that seems a little odd. Oh, crazy conspiracy theorist! Stop listening to these people entirely. I know it's hard to make new habits, right? You wake up in the morning, turn on the news. Turn on Fox, turn on CNN, whatever. Do these news outlets deserve your attention? Do these people, do these elites deserve your trust? I'll end with this fact. The Battle of Cannae, this is in 200 or so, I think like 214 or something, 200 BC, right? Roman Empire, Roman Republic. 50,000 Romans were killed. That's 1/5 of Rome's entire manpower. 1/5, amazing. But also in that battle, 1/3 of the Roman Senate was killed. That means that the Senate aristocracy, right, the Senate elites, were more likely to be killed in wars in that battle than the average citizen was. The aristocracy, where they were often the first in battle and the first to die. Meanwhile, our great leaders today, like Gavin Newsom, they shut down the entire state of California and then they go eat at the French Laundry in Napa Valley, the most expensive restaurant in the country, with more than 10 people without masks, not distanced inside. These are our elites today. The greatest professors at Harvard, our most noble governors, and our wisest statesmen on TV. Telling you what to think? Yeah, those days are over. I don't know what you think. I don't know if you see our country getting better or not. I don't. Our culture is still as rotten as ever, and politics is a reflection of our culture. We still have chaos with the election. That's not going to just peter out, right? No matter how much the media wants it to go away, it's not. But even if Biden becomes president, is that good for our economy? Trillions of dollars of spending bills. That's trillions of dollars of COVID bills. And he's got trillions of dollars of infrastructure bills still to come. Just everything's going to hit, right? Everything's just in a holding pattern right now. Like, wait, see what's going to happen here. And then once the time is wrong, it's all going to crash. Unprecedented spending in DC, unprecedented printing of money. Bottom line, there's no other way to interpret this at all. There's only one thing that can happen from all this. It's inflation. And when inflation hits, the value of the dollar just plummets. And then gold's worth more. That's why Goldman Sachs came out the other day and said, with more confidence than ever, they said that gold's going to hit $2,300 next year. Right now, it's just under $1,900. So they said $2,300 next year, and the Bank of America has it at $3,000. These are U.S. banks, and they're watching the value of the dollar. The media's not, but the banks sure are. So let's get some gold. Patriot Gold Group, they're the best. They're not the fifth best. They're not the second best. They are the best. 1-800-798-4260. Get gold and silver. I did because I know that the value of the dollar is going to go down. That's it. Good people at Patriot Gold Group. You're working directly with the owners. So if you have any issue whatsoever, you let me know. We'll take care of it. But you won't have any issue. But if you do, any questions you have whatsoever, 1-800-798-4260 or patriotgoldgroup.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders, want to go to one of our favorite guests, David Reboy, a national security analyst. David, how are you, brother?
Good, how are you?
Good to talk to you. So let's just do a quick segue out of our last segment of how the media is just awful. And just to put it nicely, I think everyone needs to rethink their inputs and curate their inputs about what they take in. And out of habit, we've given the cable news and legacy media just way too much of our time and attention. What do you think of that?
I think that's true. I think the best thing we could have learned from the last 4 years is to have a discerning attitude about agendas and sources behind the news that's reported. We have more people than ever now being able to look at a news article and say, hey, these unnamed sources could be interested parties. Actually, they're always interested parties. And also as far as the agenda goes, reporting on things like, COVID has been so ridiculous and so political. That's even putting aside Spygate and all the other scandals that have gone on. I mean, the media has completely lost its credibility. And the fact that it has, by its own doing, created a kind of crisis in this country, which makes us unable to tell truth, but tell the difference between truth and fiction.
Yeah, that's the big concern is you can find whatever you want to agree with you. And I don't know how, when there were 3 news channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, at least we were all watching the same, right? So they could lie to you or whatever, but at least we were all on the same page. Now what do we do when literally in the next few weeks, half the country could think one person's the president and the other half thinks another person's the president? What do we do in that world?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's tricky. It's unprecedented. As you said, when there used to be 3 channels, there were 3 channels, and then there was broadcast, other broadcast media. There were movies, there were TV shows, there were books and magazines and newspapers and things like that. But the important thing was everything went one way, and it was the media industry elites pushing information out to the people. Now what you have is you've got that totally upended, and you have several different nodes of communication. You have people talking to one another. You have information from sort of the people, anonymous people on the internet or whoever, sent up through the filter of the mainstream media and back. So it's a friend of mine calls it the difference between kind of the end of the televisual age, where they could no longer tell us a story or give us a narrative. Now it's a kind of free for all, and that the advent of that promised more democracy in kind of the classical sense, in the sense that everyone can participate in this in creating narratives for themselves. But what ends up happening, of course, is that it just turns into a big it turns into echo chambers and a big ball of crazy. Now whether or not that's advantageous to to the health of a society is a different thing. But surely what it means is, I think we can say the end of the kind of one-way broadcast televisual world is over. So of course these things come with good and bad.
Yeah, so totally. And I understand the good of it, and there is good of it. But I'm very concerned about the bad. And it's just such a balkanization of, and there's no such thing as truth at all. And I don't know how we communicate with that being the case. You brought up COVID. We hear about the Great Reset. That's what it's being called right now, by the people doing it. Is this a grand conspiracy? How do you think about this, and what do you see these governments doing moving forward?
Well, in a way, it's just repackaged. It's just repackaged globalist leftist ideology that's been put to use at the right moment. It's the same thing as the Green New Deal. It's the same thing as the stuff that Naomi Klein has been talking about forever. It's just, hey, we want to get to full government control of the economy, full government control of speech and all these things. We want to get to full government control. How do we get there? Well, based on different events, you come up with different excuses. I mean, at the end of the day, this kind of thing, if the Great Reset fails, there will be another Great Reset about something else soon. Yeah. So it's something that I think we're going to have to keep fighting, probably for the next, for the foreseeable future.
So you mentioned that on the fighting, and this is something I've been thinking about, and I don't know the right way to do this exactly, but I feel like conservatives are always on the defense, right? So they come up with the Great Reset, and we always have to play defense on that. How do conservatives get on an offensive posture when it comes to everything, culture and or governance?
Right. Well, it only appears that way because they have the institutions. So, of course, our kind of decentralized, let's say, nationalist or kind of anti-globalist point of view doesn't have these institutions. So by nature, we're always going to be reacting, and we're always going to say no. The other thing, too, is that sort of the nature of the, let's say, the nature of the nationalist project, which is, we're going to, or conservative project, we're going to concentrate on things that are local. We're going to embrace some of our, traditional beliefs and customs, and want to concentrate on, let's say, classical Republican form of classical federalist type of government. And really, when you look at folks who are abroad, whether they be Orban or they be Bolsonaro in Brazil, or folks like that, what they want to do is get out from under the thumb of large organizations that are
kind of breaking up. We've lost the Reboy. Oh, we were right in the middle of a grand big. I think we have to lose him. Darn it. You know what? That's the first guest we've lost in the middle of the show. That's not too bad, all things considered. We'll try to get the Reboy back on a little later if we possibly can. But we have to take a break here in a minute anyway. So coming up next, I want to talk with Professor Vincent Racaniello. He's our virologist, of course. And we have some wonderful news. We have a third vaccine that's now out. So we'll talk about the details of that and get to the science behind actually how that works. Again, something else the media will never take the time to talk about. The next true story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back. We talked with our favorite professor. We're talking now with our favorite professor, Professor Vincent Racaniello. He's a virologist at Columbia University, and he's the host of the podcast, This Week in Virology, microbe.tv. You need to check it out. And the professor failed last week to mention to us that the day after we talked, so last Tuesday, he was talking to an astronaut on the International Space Station. Failed to just mention that may be like an interesting thing that we should listen to.
Sorry, I really didn't think you would care. But yeah, that was pretty exciting. Kate Rubins is actually a virologist. She used to work in a lab on viruses, and then she applied to the astronaut program one day and got in. So
wow,
it's cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah, very cool. Okay, let's talk about the breaking news. AstraZeneca, I've seen this also called the Oxford vaccine.
Right.
What do we know about this?
So this is a different vaccine from Mrna and Pfizer that we talked about last time. This one uses a virus vector, an adenovirus. So a different virus, and in this case, it's actually an adenovirus from chimpanzees, because no human should be infected with that, and therefore there won't be any immune response to block it. So they took the gene, remember the spike protein of coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, these little spikes on the surface. That's what's in the mRNA vaccines. And they took the same gene for that, put it in this adenovirus, and then they inject this into people. And they got, again, pretty good, average 70% efficacy in their phase 3 trial. So I think that's great. A very different vaccine. It's getting similar results.
Wow. Okay, what does adeno mean in adenovirus?
Oh, the adenoids, the things in your throat, the tonsils, right? The medical term for them is adenoids. They're lymph nodes in your throat. When you get a cold, they swell. You can feel them right down here, and you can tell if you have a cold or not by them being swollen. So this virus was discovered in the 1950s because it infects those tonsils there. So adenovirus, that's where the name comes from.
Adenovirus. Okay, so let me get this right. They took a virus from monkeys, right?
Right, chimpanzees.
Chimpanzees that doesn't infect humans because it's a monkey virus.
Right.
Took that virus and did what to it?
So they remove a lot of genes so that it does not reproduce in people. This is what we call a non-replicating vector. It's injected into you. It makes mRNA for the spike, and that's it. So you don't make new adenoviruses when you're injected with this. It's defective. Wow. It just delivers the gene for the spike. You make the spike protein, and you make an immune response against it.
Jeez, okay. How is that even remotely possible for scientists to do that? That is so mind-blowing. Cool.
Like last week, the mRNA vaccine. This week, this adenovirus vector, and there's more to come. This is all because people have been chugging away in labs for the last 20 years, doing things, following their curiosity, and now it's paying off, right? It's amazing, isn't it?
Wow. I remember when we talked months ago, it was maybe we'll never have a vaccine. And now it's not even the end of the year, and we have 3. And 70%, I remember you would have thought 70% was a miracle, and now we have other ones that are 90%.
Yeah, no, I think this is an important point. At the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know if any vaccine would work. You just don't know till you make them. And so here we are, less than a year. It's unbelievable that we have already 3 candidates that look great, and they can make billions of doses next year. So this is going to be the way out of this. This is really the way out, to have vaccines.
Tremendous. Can you give us a quick tutorial and recap on mRNA? What is that?
Okay, so, we're made up of DNA. Viruses can be made of DNA or RNA, but the way you make proteins from DNA is that the cell converts it to mRNA in the nucleus of the cell. Then it goes out into the cytoplasm of the cell, and there it makes proteins. It encodes proteins. So mRNA is direct antecedent to proteins. So the mRNA vaccines from last week, Moderna and Pfizer, they make the mRNA. They wrap it up in lipids to protect it. They inject it into you. It gets taken up by your cells. Your cells make spike protein. Remember spike? The viral protein is foreign. We make an immune response, and then that protects us against infection. And it's the spike protein that is encoded in the mRNA and also in the adenovirus vectors.
So DNA makes mRNA,
Right.
And the mRNA makes these proteins that is neutralize the right word? Neutralize the virus, or is that not right?
So the proteins are made in our cells, and we recognize them as foreign because we don't have any spike, right, in our genome. So we recognize them as foreign. Then we make antibodies and T cells, and those hang around. And when we get infected with SARS-CoV-2, bam, they knock it out.
Wow. Okay. Really cool. And I think I have some at least elementary visual of what that looks like. I read something that the mRNA, these mRNA vaccines, because they're successful right now, may in the future help some cancer patients. Do you know anything about like what else mRNA could be used for?
Anything you want to give to a patient in the form of a, say, therapeutic protein of any kind, if you want to deliver. So for some cancer therapy, we give patients monoclonal antibodies against cancer proteins, cancer cell proteins to destroy them, much like we give monoclonals to viruses to block them. You could deliver that with an mRNA. If you wanted to give some other kind of therapeutic protein, you could deliver it by mRNA. So what we're learning from this is that you can make an mRNA, you can package it up in these little, they're called lipid nanoparticles. They're very stable, and you can inject them, they'll go in cells, and they'll make the protein. It's really, and it's going to be broadly applicable and also to other viruses. You know, if a new virus pops up in 5-10 years, we can immediately make a vaccine this way. It's really very exciting, I think.
So is this a new thing, this mRNA vector,
Yes.
this way to get into the body? That's new. We don't do that a lot.
We have never made an mRNA vaccine. This company, Mrna, was the first to do it. And it was never in people. I mean, there have been some safety trials before in people, but no one ever asked, can an mRNA vaccine protect against infection? This is the first time. And I think because both of them worked, you're seeing the birth of a new therapeutic, mRNA therapeutics, for sure.
Professor,
Remember that movie? Remember the movie when the guy said plastics? I'm saying to you, mRNA.
Professor, this is a huge deal. Like this, I can't even fathom what a big deal this is.
It is a huge deal in many ways. It's a new therapeutic, and they did it so quickly. They coordinated, all these companies coordinated with clinical centers to do these trials at every level. You know, we don't know the details. I'm telling you something, to set up a clinical trial of this size in such a short time is amazing. You have no idea the paperwork, all the stuff that has to be done. Yeah. The whole thing is remarkable, really.
And I'm thinking of future uses that we don't even contemplate right now that this could be used for, and it all comes back to this. That's really amazing. Let's talk about these home testing kits that the FDA did they approve these home testing kits, or are they about to? Or
so one was approved. I forgot the name of the company here. We talked about it on TWIV. It's a little home testing kit. You need to get a prescription. You can't just go buy it in a drugstore, but you get a prescription. You take it home, and you put saliva in a tube or a swab in a tube, and it's a little machine that does a nucleic acid amplification, and it's really remarkable. It does it very quickly, and you can get the results. Actually, there's a light on the bottom of the machine, and it says positive or negative. The company is Lucira, Lucira, and this little machine. It's got two lights. It says ready, you put your tube in, and then it says done, and it tells you positive or negative. It's amazing. Now, it's $50. It's not cheap, but it's something you could do at home under prescription.
Wow. I mean, again, that should be $5,000. You'd think that would be thousands and thousands of dollars. $50.
It's amazing, yeah. It's really amazing.
Okay, so why do you need a prescription for it?
I think that they don't want everybody just doing this left and right. They want to put it out there in a controlled manner and see how it works for a while.
Any idea about accuracy?
No, we don't know yet. I mean, that's a good question, because even if it's 90% accurate, 10% of millions of people is a big problem, right? So my feeling is if you take this and you're positive, you tell your doctor, and they're probably going to give you another test to confirm it.
Do you know how fast the results come back?
Oh, it's like 15 minutes, right? It's very quick.
Okay, so this could be used for schools, right?
Could be used for schools, yeah. I mean, it's a lot of money, though, right? 30 minutes. Yeah, 30 minutes. That's great. It's not 10 minutes, but still, it could be used for schools. $50 is a lot of money.
$50 what? $50 per test, or $50 for the For the machine.
test, yeah. Well, the machine is
Oh, per
disposable.
test.
It's
That's what I said.
disposable.
Okay, $50 a test. I'm sorry, I thought it was $50 for the machine. Yeah. Okay. All right, yeah, $50 a test. That adds up. You can't be doing that every day yet.
But if you could reuse the machine, right? If you could reuse the machine and put a new tube in, that would be great. I would spend $50. Then you could do it every day, right?
One more quick question about the previous vaccine, the AstraZeneca. Do you know anything about the cold chain on that? We had our logistics guy on the other day who said the cold chain is difficult enough where maybe the current 2 vaccines may not be able to get to remote areas, but he said maybe a less effective vaccine will not need as much of a cold chain, right? So that's the trade-off there. So what do you know about AstraZeneca and the cold chain?
All right, this one does not need really, really cold temperatures.
There you go.
This has
Perfect.
this has a better cold chain, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there you go. So that could get out to the more rural areas, no problem.
Absolutely.
Wow, this is really wonderful news. All right, Professor, do you have any other final thoughts here?
We talked about a study on TWIV on Friday showing that after infection, it looks like immunity can last a long time, years maybe. So antibodies and T cells, that's good news, right? Because we were wondering about that. Now that's after natural infection. The question will be after the vaccine, how long does immunity last? But I don't see why it should be any different from the virus. So it's looking good. I'm encouraged.
Wow, that's great. Well, so I was super encouraged here. And then tomorrow the professor's talking to somebody from Mars. I don't know. Maybe you are, Professor. You wouldn't tell us if you were, so why not?
Well, now that you want to know, we are not talking to anyone from Mars tomorrow. We have nothing this because it's Thanksgiving week. We're taking it easy.
That's true. Fair enough. You're talking to nobody. But if you want to go check out all the episodes, go to TWIV this week in microbe.tv. It's called This Week in Virology. Microbe.tv is the website. Thanks, Professor.
My pleasure. Take care.
We'll talk next week. Beautiful. Great, wonderful news. True story. Mike Slater. We'll see you tomorrow. Spread the word.